Hello and welcome to Lone Star Silver Screen, a podcast about everything that exists at the intersection of Texas and the movies. I'm your host, Austin Zook, and today I am joined by filmmaker John Moore to talk about his new documentary, When We Were Live, which is all about the pioneers of Austin's public access television in the 80s and 90s. John, how are you doing today?
I am wonderful. I don't teach. I'm a college professor and I don't teach on Mondays. So it's always nice, even though I'm working, to have that little extension to the weekend.
Absolutely. Where are you a professor at?
I'm a professor of radio, television, and film at Austin Community College.
Okay. Very cool. How long have you done that?
I have been there this is going on 7 years. 7 years. Amazingly, I was an adjunct there for like one semester and I ended up getting the job right when that amazing thing happened in March of 2020. So it was extreme luck.
Well, I'm glad you've been able to hang on to it and it kind of got through the worst of that whole experience. So let me ask you this. How did you find time to make a documentary while you were also teaching classes?
Well, it's crazy because, even before that, from the moment I started, I always had a full-time job. I was a staff video editor at Rooster Teeth for 3 years. Before
Very
that.
cool.
Yeah. So so that was actually more of a challenge because that's when you're doing content creation and it just really zaps you, your creative energy. Even though working there was great, it just zaps your creative energy. You come home, you just want to drink a beer and pass out. And so it's good. It was very much a nights and weekends thing, and the other part of that was that I had a producer and co-writer, still do have, Keely Steenson, who was really kind of my rock with doing this, who really we kept each other on deadlines, and she really also would be the voice of reason, telling me if something didn't work or making suggestions. So I was only kind of half of the process, but it was just a lot of fortitude. It was just a lot of okay, I don't teach on Fridays, so that day is going to be doing this. I could have probably had it done 4 years ago if it wasn't for, if I did do this full time. But yeah, just spit and shine, I guess.
So what was it that made you decide, I have to make this documentary? When We Were Live needs to come from me, and I care enough about this to develop it for years until it's ready for an audience?
So that's a really good question. First of all, and I have a feeling we're probably about the same age. We're both kids of this VCR generation of when we were kids, we'd watch our little CRT TVs and I had a stack of blank tapes with this name crossed out and that one. So I've always been really into video culture, and I always knew that I wanted to make a documentary that really lived in found footage. I've always knew that because one thing about modern docs that, even though I enjoy them, that a lot of the current model is you have a talking head and you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it always kind of took me out of it a little bit. And I'm I understand why you're doing that, but we're not living in this footage. If you watch The Alabama Solution or Perfect Neighbor, those movies these days are doing that a little bit more. So I was always looking for a subject that I could do that with. And I remember one time I was working for a video department just as an editor, and I was talking to some friends that were born and raised in Austin, and they were saying oh yeah, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager in the 90s, we'd go to these sweet parties in Austin, and then around, midnight, we'd all have to go home though. And I'd be like, why? Did the cops break you up? And they're like, no, because Old Biddy would be on. And I was like, what the hell is that? And they were like, it was a show on public access. And I was like, you would leave a party in the 90s in Austin to go home and watch this? And they were like, yeah, it's like a foul-mouthed church lady that that encouraged you to call in and mess with her. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it took me 6 months. I got in touch with this guy. He's actually a good friend of mine now, James. And I got in touch with him and said hey, can I interview you? I'm thinking about doing a documentary. And he was like, yeah, sure. And so but he was kind of like, well, if you like what I'm doing, then you should talk to this person. So I would reach out to that person and they would say, oh, if you like what I'm doing, you should reach out to, there was a drag queen named Carmen Banana. You should reach out to them. I'd go to, and nobody leaves Austin, A, and B, everyone wouldn't just say, sure, you can do it. They would say, here is a box of tapes that has been in my attic that nobody's asked about in 30 years. And it just kept going on and on. If you like what I did, there was another guy who did this crazy show, and everybody knew each other. And after a while, it became well known that I was kind of digitizing and collecting and putting this thing together. And it just became obvious that this was so much more than one or two stories. This was this untapped vein really throughout Austin, which is this romanticized city, but also just an American phenomenon. The fact that like most towns had public access television and that, this had a chance to be a story that wasn't just in a bottle. It wasn't just like a South by Southwest film that's just going to be about this Texas phenomena, which I love. This is going to be something that's really going to strike at the heart of kind of what brought us into this content creation obsessed world that we're in today. So that was kind of the zeitgeist, the ethos of like how it started.
And so you didn't want to rely on talking heads to tell the story. But the nice thing about talking heads when you're making a documentary is they do kind of provide you a framework that you can work around, right? And so when you've got all this footage and all these different stories and you don't want it to just be told by talking heads, I mean, how do you even start sorting that into a narrative that kind of makes sense?
Very difficult because, honestly, a big thing is I interviewed so many people and the whole thing was that's always the hardest thing to do is to say like, we have to keep this interview. We have to keep this interview. The other thing is because we're not showing people's faces and it's just their voices, we have to be very careful about oversaturating it with talking with disembodied voices because you're going to get confused on who is who.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that's going to be a big thing. There have been documentaries that I love that have tried this, that's where they've been lost. It's been like, I don't know who's saying that. I haven't gotten acquainted. So we had a couple of things that we wanted to do. We knew that we didn't want this to be a single demographic, that it was going to be, we had to make it so it was like, we wanted people coming from different facets of the city. So we have Gilberto, who's really coming from the East Side and Chicano, Latino, and like that whole thing where it was being gentrified, really representing this underserved community. And then I wanted to have Carmen in there because it was this livelihood just showing how integrated in the community, the gay community was, that they were everywhere. And also that, the AIDS epidemic hit. So those were two right there. And then the third one was there was a late night portion to that. So, Olivia really filled that out. And then also there were a lot of women calling into her show and I wanted that represented. So, and then there are other people in there who also provide different amounts of context for different things. But like my friend Dave Pruitt, who's this amazing music guy, also is in there quite a bit. And so it was just kind of like people coming from different demographics, people that were recognizable that we could instantly say, that's David, that's Carmen Banana right there. And then also, I liked the idea of finding people who started out doing it for one reason, and then something else happened, and it became a lot more higher stakes. Like with David Hahn, with Carmen Banana, started out doing it just to be a drag queen on TV. We have tons of drag queens in towns. David just wanted to be on TV, and then all of a sudden, the AIDS epidemic hits and how it becomes a real community issue.
Right.
And so having that arc was another very important thing. So those three things, demographic, recognizability, and an arc, were kind of the biggest ways that we decided on who was going to be like the main talking heads.
Did you ever find yourself running down a path with someone who you're like, okay, I think this could be an arc, this could be one of our main characters kind of, and then just being like, you know what, there's not enough here?
So it was never there's not enough here. It was always there's too much here.
Okay.
Is what it was. Like I actually have a couple of things that didn't make into the movie that I want to make standalone shorts out of, because the whole thing about it, in the same style where it's almost all archival stuff, it's because it was more like a disservice to them, that it was like, just showing you in a flash like this is not fair. And it's really not fair to the city because a lot of people here know the ins and outs of that. So a lot of it was like, okay, I can't tell this without telling this. And that's just not going to fit in here. And I had to do that so many times. And it kind of breaks your heart a little bit because you know how rich this path is, this storyline is.
What was the biggest surprise for you when you started on this project and started going through all the footage?
how relevant it is today, without a doubt how relevant it is today. I mean, we're talking about the entire arc about these people using media to fight white supremacy. My gosh, that really struck me at the core. We talk about like the othering of the LGBTQ community, like when they were saying like we want to take people that have AIDS and put them in quarantine. Like it was just, and also just in general, how today, like channel surfing was to doom scrolling today, and how similar it is, and how it's the exact same logic. You have to be doing something shocking to catch people's attention. It's the exact same logic as being on TikTok and Instagram. It's incredible.
So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, they've kind of taken the place of like public access television in popular culture, right? Do you feel like that transition, do you feel like we've lost anything in that?
I think yes and no. So I think that there has been obviously a huge replacement, because there were two things that really made public access very special. The first was that the limitations of media at the time, you couldn't, when you went to this television station to broadcast, it wouldn't go outside of your city lines. So everything that you were talking about was relevant to the city. It was a lot of times it would be open 24 hours. You could just drive down to the station and hang out. If you would turn on the TV station, it'd be like, there's some guy like having a live band. Okay, I'm going to go see it right now. And it would also be like calling in. You knew that that person was from Austin or from Milwaukee or wherever. It was within that town. So that's the first thing that I think got lost. For all of the good that comes from being able to speak to everyone around the world, there was a charm to that limitation. The other thing that I think is a little lost is the concept of today. Let me see if I got this bad boy right here. You can make anything with this. You know, I can take this, I can film it, publish it, everything. There was a joy in knowing that you had to share equipment and facilities with people who you may totally disagree with. It was the ultimate community cooperative thing. And you saw these people and you knew these people, and you would go to get together with people. And there was a pride of being a part of that. Whereas, you know, you can be a part of a team of content creators, but it's not quite the same of knowing that you're reliant on this gear. So those are the things that I think have been lost. I will say, though, there are a number of community media things that are still going today, outlets. Like there's Austin Public. There's also the Manhattan Neighborhood Network in New York, which is amazing. There's Bay Area Video, a collective, and they are all absolutely amazing. But what they do now is they have a pretty great cooperation where it's you make something and the requirement is that you have to put it on Access or put some version of that on Access. But at the same time, you can still use this for your own content creation. You can still put a version of this on Twitch or on Instagram, you know? So it really is, and you're also teaching people how to use this advanced gear, and there's an emphasis on community media. So there still is a version of it that, you know, that's kind of a handshake between the local and the international. But yeah, it definitely, there is something I think a little about that joy of it just being within a community.
Well, and you were talking earlier about how you didn't want to do a disservice to any stories because they are still so relevant and so important to people who remember watching these programs, right?
Yeah.
What has the response been like at screenings? I mean, are people celebrating this footage when they see it?
Yeah, a lot of people are celebrating it when they see it. My one thing that I always am a little fearful of when I show it in Austin is that people are going to get mad that they're not in it, even though it's a 90-minute film. I can't cram everyone into this. And like, I also, you know, I'm kind of chained to having a meaningful arc to people who aren't from Austin as well. But yes, the response has been amazing. When we were at Fantastic Fest, I mean, this huge festival, which by the way, they don't have a documentary category. They only let in people when they like the doc. And we were one of 3 films that were docs in that entire festival that they just chose like out of category to play there, and which was crazy because it's a genre film festival, but it was insane when we were playing there, the crossover between these horror fanatics and the fact that they all also love this nostalgic 80s stuff. So like we both screenings were 100% sold out, like line everything to get in. And then honestly, when we played it in Atlanta, we were really nervous because we were like, well, wait a minute, this is our first time not playing in Austin. No, we had an amazing response there. It was actually a massive theater that we played in, so it was hard to measure it as much, but we had a great response there. And they were the ones going there because it's a lot of Southern stories and they like
Right.
that. We've also had other festivals respond to the queer element and to Carmen. So it's been universally very relatable, much more than we ever thought it would be, you know?
And so now, whenever you're looking at it, I mean, like you said, Fantastic Fest doesn't do a lot of documentaries, but this does feel like a Fantastic Fest documentary, if there is such a thing, right? Because it's not a traditional doc. You know, you're kind of like we've talked about, you're relying on this archival footage and you're really trying to let that tell its own story. I wanted to go back to just the construction of the film and, you know, after you got the footage and you kind of know the stories you want to track, what was the process like just editing all of this together?
Yeah, you know, I was the editor on this. So, first of all, that's how I could afford to make it, is that it's a found footage film and I am paying myself to edit it, essentially, you know, like out of my own pocket. So it was definitely very difficult. And the thing that became crazy is over the course of 10 years, I didn't even have to think about clips or look for them. Like I just had this mental Rolodex where I was like, I need something that's really shocking and funny. Here's 5 off the top of my head that are like that. So that was really useful. And that's another thing is I have had people act as assistant editors who have come in and who have done a lot of organizational stuff to help me out. But really, I could never have an assistant editor go through and really pull clips for me because it would take years for them to recognize all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? The people who I did have were absolutely amazing, but they did a lot more like research for me and stuff. But I mean, it honestly, when we edited it together, we actually made 4 like assembly cuts, one for each character, really.
Wow.
So I mean, they weren't good. They were just kind of like, this happened, this happened, this happened. And so we did that for 4 different characters. And then it became Keely and I, my producer and writer, we sat there with those 4 assemblies. We laid it out beat by beat. And then we said, how can we combine these? What are the relevant things there? And the thing was, the biggest problem in doing this, and it took us years to realize how to solve this, was the pathos of it, was the idea that like, this has to be sad one moment. It makes you want to cry because we're talking about the AIDS epidemic or fighting the KKK. And then the next moment, it has to be hilarious. So how do we do that? And the solution we came up with, because we had so many clips that we loved, is like, can we just kind of robot chicken show a random clip in between these 2 scenes to kind of set the mood? Can we literally just stop this tragedy, show a random non sequitur scene, and then pick it up? Yeah. And that's how we ended up doing it, was just like, yeah, we're going to stop this horrific scene's going to end right here. We're going to go, like, you're flipping through channels, you're going to go see this, and that's going to cleanse your palate, and then you can go to this. So it was the arc, and then it was finding the different devices in order to do this.
And you guys got it down to 90 minutes, which is very impressive. I mean, was there ever a moment where you were like, I think this needs to be 3 hours long if I'm going to do it justice?
My God, I feel so sorry for the first focus screening we had. It was like 2.5 hours long. It was really bad. And they stuck with it from start to finish. And it was not good. Like they were all like, you did a great job. And here's what I would cut. And so, trust me, we did have like a 3-hour cut for a long time. That,
so
like,
I've never
nobody would
had
watch.
anyone on who's talked about that experience and kind of showing it to sort of a focus group and getting feedback and acting on that. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that was like?
My God. So what was the thing? Like, I never watched the master class with him, but Martin Scorsese has that famous thing where he says, if you don't get physically ill when you're watching your first rough cut, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was. I would get like physically ill watching it, because also it was sunken cost fallacy at that point. I had spent like 6 years at this point working on this when I could have been like, learning the guitar or learning a more profitable trade or something like that. And so you're like, what have I done with my 30s? And so that was... So you're walking in with that, but with the focus screening, it's really, really good for a couple of reasons. Number one, you need deadlines as a filmmaker, but this is just for me being an editor at Rooster Teeth. You need deadlines. Like, you have to have them to work. If it's just left up for your own devices and there's no third-party element there, you're going to make excuses and you're going to say, well, I'll put it off. Well, I'll put it off. When you actually have people depending on you, that's a fire right there that you have to kind of do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, even if it's the worst screening in the world, you are doing yourself such a favor by laying it out in some form, laying it out in some form. That's going to be the second thing. And then the third part about it for focus screenings is, and this is, I think, the number one thing that I tell younger filmmakers about this, because again, I'm a college professor and I deal with a lot of students getting criticism on films for the first time. And the thing that I say to them all the time is a criticism or a note is not a personal insult. It may feel like it, but it's not. They're not insulting your family. They're not calling you a name. They're not saying you're a crappy filmmaker. It is an honest thought. Okay. So I say to them, number one, you have to kind of filter out, because you don't have to take every note, but if there's a common thread of notes and everyone is saying, I didn't know who this was, then that's a problem. And you have to recognize that. The second you don't have a thick skin and you can't take notes on something, that's the second you plateau in whatever you're doing. Like, the myth of the genius artist who just does something once it's just that. It's a myth. Like, you have to have a thick skin and you have to be able to, it's basically, you treat it like research is what you're doing. You're treating it like research. Now, obviously we hear horror stories about like Paul Thomas Anderson showing a focus screening and getting notes and then being like, blah, blah, blah. That's different. I'm talking about when you're actually cutting the film, making your way to a final cut. You need to have an idea of what's working and what's not. And you can still be standoffish and you can still be an auteur, but you have to have that read of the room, if that makes sense.
What was the
Sorry,
toughest...
I went into college professor mode there.
No,
for a second.
I loved it. What was the toughest note to take on this film?
The toughest note to take was, I don't think that people outside of Austin are going to like this. And you know what? That was fair, because at the time that was true. It was relying on a lot of esoteric stuff for a while that if you're not from Austin, you would not get. And that is the biggest accomplishment of this entire film, is now we're showing it not just in Dallas. We're about to be the closing night film at Greenpoint in Brooklyn. And we also have a couple of other acceptances around the country that I can't talk about yet. And so, and then many more coming up. And so it really is like, that is the thing that we've accomplished, is we've made this thing that's very universally relatable, even if you're not from Texas. And that was kind of the hardest thing to kind of shape.
Well, and so you mentioned Dallas. So you guys are coming to the Oak Cliff Film Festival. Mm-hmm. I believe you're showing August 2nd. Is that right?
Yes. They are awesome. This is one of the festivals I wanted to play in so bad, because I've been hearing about it. Have you ever been to Oak Cliff?
Yeah, I go every year. I love OCF.
I am so excited for this. Like, this is one of the festivals I wanted to play in so bad, because this movie, like, it's really meant for places like this. It's a Fantastic Fest movie. It's meant for festivals that are fun. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll take the red carpet ones. That's fine. But these are the ones that I love. The ones that just have this energy and community. Like, Fantastic Fest kind of set the bar, you know?
Well, I think you're going to love it. After that, what's next for the movie?
So we do have, our festival run is going up into December, and we have a number of them already lined up, festivals. But obviously the way the festivals work is, I was just allowed to announce Oak Cliff. I have a few others already. We're waiting on like 20 others, but like we've got, out of those, we've gotten a number of them that we are over the moon about, that have the same energy as Oak Cliff. And we're on Instagram and everything. We are totally announcing those. July is going to be a great month for that. But the big thing is, we do have a plan, or we've been talking to a number of distributors, and physical media is a big part of this one. Like, just given the subject matter, we really want a physical media release. So we have some amazing prospects for that. And the whole goal now is to really continue our festival run just locally within these different towns, kind of like Oak Cliff, until late December or early December. And then we're going to kind of jump into our next step with that, which is, Blu-ray and theatrical and all that good stuff.
That's awesome. That's exciting. Now, John, I end every interview on this show by asking one very simple question, because ostensibly this is all about Texas and the movies. What's something you love about Texas?
Okay, so my father was in the Army until I was 13. I'm an Army brat.
Okay.
My first memory, literally my first memory ever, my family was stationed in Fort Hood in Killeen. And my first memory ever, I don't know how, but my brother and I were hanging out. We had one of those big, like, I don't know what you'd call it. It was like a VW bus kind of. So we had another car, but it served the purpose just as road trips. And this thing was beaten up and busted up. And I just remember sitting with my brother inside of that van, like, it was just me and him. It was just parked and we were just hanging out in there, and it had just poured down raining. I mean, downpour. And literally one of my first memories was looking out the window and just seeing this sky that looked like it was on fire. And that Texas sunset that isn't exclusive to that right there, especially when you get out into wide open areas, it doesn't beat that. That is what reminds me of Texas to this day, that kind of Friday Night Lights sky. I love that so much.
I grew up in Gatesville, Texas, right outside of Fort Hood, so I know the exact kind of sunset you're talking about.
I love it. Oh my God. It also just Texas in general, even especially when you step outside of Austin and that bubble, there's just something so special about this place. And it's just something so special about the pride that goes into being from Texas is just what I love,
Yeah, absolutely. John, if people are listening to this and they want to follow you in the film's journey, where can they go?
The best is going to be two things. It's going to be on Instagram at When We Were Live. Not hard to remember. That's going to be the first thing right there. That's become kind of the lead thing. But also, whenever we find something that we're like, this is amazing, but we don't know if we're going to be able to fit it in the movie, we put it on our YouTube channel. So our YouTube channel is less an advertisement for the movie and just this collection of weird crap that we found over the years. And just beautiful, amazing, well-produced stuff that touches us. So, and that's just, if you go on YouTube and look for When We Were Live, that's the other thing. And I put announcements on there too. So
that is so cool. I'm going to include links to the Instagram page and the YouTube page in the description of this episode. So if you're listening, make sure you go and check that out. If you live in Dallas, make sure you come out and see the film at the Oak Cliff Film Festival on August 2nd. And anyone else, just keep an eye out because it'll probably be playing at a festival near you before too long. John, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming out today, man. This has been a real pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Austin. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and follow us wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at Lone Star Film Pod. We'll be back soon with another new episode, but in the meantime, we'll see you at the movies and on the dusty trails of Texas. Bye.